I am angry. Now, I'm wearing my Caribbean hat today rather than one of my sort of work-related baseball caps because I'm going to talk about the Empire Windrush. Now, I did say some time ago that I'd come back to you on the channel about Empire Windrush. By the way, just before we go, please do subscribe. We're going to do some discussions on the channel as per normal. And the reason why I'm angry, it's because, again, people are talking about the Empire Windrush, and there's a great song called London is the place for me, which is always sung as part of the newsreel, which, when the Empire Windrush arrived in 1948, was played by Pathé News, you know, the BBC News system, which was like a newsreel, which was put out to everybody in the cinemas, and because there wasn't so much TV in those days, but in the cinema, so you could watch what was going on. And it showed all the guys coming off the boat, mainly from Jamaica, where the ship had landed. And what it said was, these are people coming to the mother country. These are citizens coming to the mother country. Most of them are ex-servicemen. In fact, many are returning to rejoin the RAF. So, when we talk about the Empire Windrush and we're talking about how these people came to assist Britain after the war, no! It's not after the war. These people were here during the war. These people were part of all of the United Kingdom's forces. My father, example, served through the war on the convoys. Actually, one of the biggest places for loss of British, and by that you also have to include Empire, service people who kept Britain alive, actually in some ways to the detriment of about 2 million Indians who lost their life because the food was being shipped from India to Britain, but that's another question. By the way, who kept Britain alive by assisting to bring across the goods in the convoys which the German U-boats were sinking all the time. And that's the closest Britain came to losing the war, actually, other than perhaps the Battle of Britain, was the fact that if they lost the war in the Atlantic and the movement of convoys, i.e. ships carrying goods to feed Britain, coming from the colonies which were part of the United Kingdom. You need to understand this, and this is what we're forgetting. These weren't immigrants getting off the Empire Windrush. These were British citizens. Every one of them had a British passport. That's the only passport they could have. Yes, it said British colonial citizen Jamaica, British colonial citizen Barbados, British colonial citizen wherever. The bottom line is they were subjects of Great Britain. That's what they were. It was their right. It was as if they were moving from, using Boris Johnson's position quite recently, from Camden to Islington. Maybe they're the same two things. Maybe I got it mixed up. Let's say from Westminster to Camden. It was just moving from one part of Britain and Empire to another part of Britain's empire. That's all they were doing. They were coming to the mother country. The commentator on the Pathé News even says they're coming to the mother country. The song even says, I'm coming to my mother country. The song I spoke to you about, London is a place for me, it says, I'm coming back to my mother country. Okay, I can't sing it as well as he could, but that's what it was about. So what I'm saying to you is, understand your history. These are not immigrants coming to Britain. These are citizens coming back to the part of their country which happens to be Great Britain. Right? That's the first thing. Second thing is, black people were not new to Britain in 1948. We'd fought in every war which they had, and if you want to actually look on the victory, okay, what's it, 1724 Battle of Trafalgar, Admiral Lord Nelson? The two people holding up Admiral Lord Nelson when he's mortally shot and wounded are two black guys on the ship. They are fighting in the Royal Navy. Right? Let's go back even further. And, if you will, Queen Elizabeth I, she says there are too many blackamoors in the kingdom, we need to get rid of them. By blackamoors, she means black people. That's in 16 odd. Actually, I think it's about 1595. The information sits in the British Museum. It isn't new. So she's saying at that time there were too many. She gave the job to a magistrate in London to try and kick these blackamoors, blacks, out of Britain because there's too many of them. If you read Hansard's, and these are all official papers, this is not stuff I'm making up, so you can go and check it. These are all official papers. Read Hansard's, which is the official statement of what is said in the House of Commons and is written down as people speak. Right? One MP stands up after the American War of Independence. Let's get this clear. The American War of Independence, where America splits off from the rest of the empire. Remember this empire we're talking about? Splits off from the rest of this empire and defeats Britain. What happened is, during that battle, the Brits, his general in charge, made an open proclamation to all blacks who were fighting on the side of the then Americans, that if you fought for us, you will be free. And if we happen to lose this war, we will bring you all to Britain. Well, as we know, Britain lost the war. What happened is with the blacks is they were first taken to Canada. So these blacks said, no, you promised to take us to Britain. So in effect, that is actually what happened. Some figures say 10,000, some figures say 30,000, some say even more. But whatever the figure is, these people, some of them, were taken to Britain. Many stayed in Canada, so you have a lot of blacks in Canada. But then they went on to Britain. And they landed and were put in places like, particularly in the East End of London. So when you see Hogarth's etchings in the East End of London in that period of time, 1790s, 1780s, 1790s, you see him etching with a lot of blacks in those areas. Yeah, they're in the roughest areas. There's Blind Beggar Bob, I think, is one of the main characters. There's a very few sort of roughneck characters. They happen to be black guys who were there because they were poor. They had fought in the War of Independence. They weren't paid their pensions, so then had a problem, so they had to go begging. So there's a thing then brought out in Parliament called the Poor Black Relief, right? Which says these guys now need paying some money for their war actions. One MP stands up and says, there are too many blacks here, you can't go in a town or a village or a hamlet where you don't see the offspring of their loin. Now maybe he's exaggerating, as right-wingers tend to do, but he's basically saying they're everywhere, these people. So that's why Sierra Leone is bought on West Africa to try and ship these people out of Britain to West Africa, right? Some take it up, and what he actually said, that guy, when he said, the MP, when he said, and the lower order of women, i.e. white women, tend to seem to like these, and I'm not going to say what words he said. Anyway, the bottom line is, Sierra Leone project is brought about, and what they try to do then is ship these guys and gals out, and their white wives, out of Britain to Africa. And that's how Sierra Leone is brought about. That's why they speak English there, pidgin, foreign pidgin, and that's why most of them have English-sounding names. Now, the vast majority didn't take that up and lived in Britain and continued living in Britain. Now, what has happened with these people is, because they married white women, because most of them mixed with the local people, within time, 1, 2, 3 generations, the colour has faded away so much. So it appeared as though there weren't that many there. But actually, the DNA is still in their bodies and the heritage is still in their bodies, which is why you can see that in the DNA of people. Now, if you want to go even further back than that, I can take you to Hadrian's Wall. And I can take you to Emperor Septimus Severus, who was a black emperor of Rome. Okay? Look it up. He's buried in York. You will see that they had with him Legianus Africanus, African legions, and that those people, once again, married with the local individuals, those legionnaires, and had children with them. And that's why you have offspring up in Cumbria, up in York, that have black ancestry with them. So what I'm saying to you is, this celebration of Windrush coming and all of a sudden black people turning up in Britain in 1948 is codswallop. And what it does is it undermines our actions within this country forever and a day. We're not new people here. Yeah? We have belonged here forever and a day. We are part of this country. The problem is, it leads to a situation which I write in my book. You may have heard, I've got a book out which is called Black Ops: Incredible True Story of a British Secret Agent, which is what I was. When I'm sitting with a Prime Minister and we're watching a football match next time, and he turns around and says, there's not a single Englishman on the team. And I point out to him that actually there are three. Gibbs, Walcott, and I can't remember who the third black fellow was, or mixed race fellow, however you want to term it. He says, no, I don't mean West Indians, I mean Englishmen. And I said to him, well, they are Englishmen. Why are they not Englishmen? And he says, well, they're West Indians. Now, I'm not calling the fella down, and by the way, the fella isn't a racist, but when the highest man in the land doesn't accept that you're not English, by the way, I should clarify, both of Gibbs's parents are British, born in England, both of them. One of them happens to be white, the other one happens to be black. Same goes for Walcott, born in England, all of them. Now, when I say to him, hold on, so are you saying to me then that Michael Portillo is not British? Then, of course he is. Well, both his parents are born in Spain. So how come he's British, but the two black guys, if you want to use that terminology, or mixed race guys, aren't British? That is our problem. We are alienating our youth because their skin colour seems to be different. But if your skin colour is the same, you can come off the boat yesterday and be English the following day after. Now, that's why I'm pretty angry when you don't explain that most of these Windrush people fought, I'll say it again, fought for Britain in the Second World War. They weren't just turning up after the war to work in local services. It wasn't just rebuilding after the war. These are people who fought for, and if you want to go even further back and put it in context, when Britain first took over places like Jamaica, by the way, Jamaica is not the land of black people, okay? Blacks are taken there by white people, happen to be British, the vast majority of them. When they take over Jamaica, they take blacks there as enslaved people, and those enslaved blacks then in time become to outnumber the number of whites there. And from day one, by the way, even before full slavery was in, the indentured servants, who happened generally to be Irish, mixed with and married blacks, and their offspring was already mixed in Jamaica. There's probably not one person who is supposedly black who's simply black, because they're all probably mixed race. And so a lot of these Jamaicans who go into, Jamaica, no, you're mixed race and you are mixed with, people of white people from Europe. That's not a problem, because those people were probably mixed anyway, because of the history I told you before about Rome, because Rome included everybody. And before that, Egypt, and we could go on and on. Right? So the point is that this race is a nonsense in reality, but the truth is it's a political reality. So it's a biological nonsense, but a political reality. And that's what I'm trying to explain today. Hopefully you understand what I'm saying. Hopefully you will look into the histories of some of the things I've said about our country. Hopefully you will understand why it angers me when the full picture isn't told. And hopefully you'll look it up and see, and to try and prove me wrong, and then you'll see, actually, the bloke's right. He knows what he's talking about. Why is it important? Because people of all races, all types, all colours need to understand that they belong to this land. Because if you don't, this is what brings about jihadism. This is what brings about or aids to bring about, not solely, or aids to bring about alienation from the state, which again can lead you into things like jihadism, definitely into crime, because you're thinking, if it isn't part of mine, if it isn't anything to do with me, I might as well rip it down, right? And if you only taught about slavery, which I was going to say, by the way, that for the first for part of that 350 years, 100 years of that, most of the blacks in the Caribbean were enslaved. But as soon as they came away from that slavery, and we're talking about now, depending on where you are, 1836, 1805, depending on where you are, slavery can end within the Caribbean. As soon as they become free citizens, and by the way, all the goods that they are making and producing are going back to the mother country. This is why it's the mother country, back to Britain. Okay, they're producing sugar, going back to Britain. They're producing bauxite, going back to Britain. Right? This is why these islands are important. But in doing all of this, the moment they are free, they become citizens of Britain and Empire. So at least 200 years, if you want to be technical about it, once they are no longer cattle, they become citizens. But even 350 years ago, you can argue if you were looking for the rights of man, they'd be citizens of this country. So, and then, of course, we've, as I said to you before, those who came in different waves before that, the American Civil War, before that, the Moors, and before that, before the Angles and Saxons even, in the Roman times, who happened to be blacks, have all been citizens of this land. So it is a land that we have and are part and parcel of. Listen, guys, hope you feel subscribe to me to have some more discussion. Come back to me on this issue if you don't believe me. Let's discuss it. If you think it's great, give me a thumbs up, but please subscribe. Well, all the best. See you later. It's Carlton Blacklock Kings signing out.